we do have an agenda here. If you need a copy, just let us know. It was shared by email. I understand that we do have some new members to the work groups and the advisory committees who are with us tonight. So if we could just start over here, and Irene, I know you're one of them, so if you could just stand up and do just a brief intro if you're an advisor or a working group member who has not been previously introduced.
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Irene Weiser and I'm from the town of Caroline. I'm a council member there. It's in Tompkins County, and we've been going through something similar. We have a gas moratorium in the town of Lansing, and so we're a few steps down the road from where you guys are, but we went through similar processes, and I hope, in whatever ways I can impart insights as to what we've dealt with and how it went, and be helpful here. So.
Anyone else?
I guess I've been away and haven't been to any of the meetings. I'm on the committee, I think.
Yes,
yeah,
you are.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch, yeah.
No, Joe.
Oh, Dave Hutchison, I've been on the environmental board for the city of Leon for many years, and planted trees, background geology, taught geology at Harvard for 32 years, so very into geothermal energy. I heard Jay Egg speak a couple of years ago, came back to the city, and during the DRI meetings, and if you were there, I kept jumping up at the end of the meetings and saying geothermal, like a little idiot. But thank goodness it looks like people heard me, and maybe the city's going to do it, maybe the town is going to do it. So I'm a happy camper.
Great. Thanks. Now, I do just have a few words that I would like to share with the entire task force just regarding communications. Some of the work that we're going to be doing is a bit proprietary. We want to keep it within the group, and also there's another reason that I want to talk about the communications guidelines, and that is that when what we're doing is new for us. We want to present our best foot forward. We want to present an organized message to the community so that we can build some trust and build an open channel of communication. But that does require that we organize how we share the information with the public. And on this one sheet, we do have some guidelines that we just respectfully are requesting that all of the members follow, that draft documents and working papers are not released to the public without the consent of the leadership committee. And so what we are, our work groups and our advisors and our leadership group are the ones who can freely share and discuss. And just for the sake of getting the best results with the information that we're gathering, we could keep it in those groups and have the leadership committee decide and coordinate, really is the better word, what documents will be released to the public and when they will be released to the public. And I think this is important, that we have a focused and balanced message, and that we respect that, and we can build the trust within the work groups, within the advisors and the advisory committee, and with the public, who hopefully will be waiting for what we release, and at one point in the future will have a chance to share with, in the work sessions that will be planned, there'll be a time to have the stakeholders and everyone give their opinions and share their expertise as well. So there will be opportunity for that. The working group meetings are for the members and the technical advisors, and just to be very clear, they are not subject to the public meeting law. This meeting was noticed. This meeting is subject to public meeting law, but the work groups are not. And we have really gone, I think, above and beyond to be transparent about this whole process. It's very important that everyone trust the people who you're working with. And we are sharing as what we're doing. We want you to trust. We want to be able to trust I'm just stressing that word. We're going to just, please respect that. And we do encourage free sharing of documents and research and data between the groups and with the leadership group. And what we're going to do next is to go through, Michelle's going to lead us through the reports for the different working groups. And I look forward to hearing what we've got to share tonight. So thank you.
Can I just ask one question related to what you just said, just for clarity, moving forward? I know that there's certain things, whether it's a draft RFP or a draft work product of some things that might be developed that is not going to be ready for the public necessarily. But I hearken back to when I've been on other committees before, a planning board committee, for example, that I sat on for 6 years, and like when we were taking up issues, basically, if there were presentations given to us, material before us that we were looking at, and somebody who was also in the room was interested in what we're talking about, what we're doing, they said, "Can I have a copy of that?" And we said, "Sure, here you go. We're glad you're interested." That's kind of the approach that was taken for material that is data, data that's not a work product from the task force necessarily, or from whatever the body is, but just data. And some of the, I guess what I'm thinking about is like at our last subcommittee meeting, there was information from a website, from NYSERDA website. There was information that I found on Otsego website and National Grid websites. And so we were sharing the stuff. It was up on the screen. People who were members of the public who were sitting in the back and watching and interested, they were seeing that material, So that kind of stuff, if somebody wants to see that, who may not have had the chance to be in that room, to see it on the screen, can we share that kind of?
I would think that I would be guided by, if it was proprietary information, you found it on the website. I would say that you didn't have a special passcode to get into that website. Right. That's not proprietary information.
Right.
So I would think that we could be guided by the boundaries of proprietary versus not proprietary. That sharing that data, you could even just tell them, I found it on this website. But when there is data that maybe someone who's coming to share with the committees might not want it to be widely known, then you would have to respect that they wouldn't want it to be widely known.
And I'm assuming if that happened, then if there were people physically present who were part of the committee, that they would be asked to leave too, for the same reason.
Possibly, and that is quite possible.
I just want to understand the consistency.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't know what we're going to be doing. We know that we're going to be finding things out. That's what we're doing. I want to be able to have the ability to say, this is a proprietary topic. Mm-hmm. This is not for general consumption. At some point, it may become public knowledge, but at this point, because our work product is our focus. So if it's going to be shared later, we can say that, but if we do prefer to not share at this point, that is our privilege, and it should be clearly stated at the time. Yeah.
Let me clear this up. The general public can't go to committee meetings. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that if there's proprietary information that's going to be given, they might be asked to leave in some scenario.
Okay. All right.
That's okay. Michelle? Okay.
So I think all the groups have met twice at this point, at least once. And so we thought we'd get started by having each group chair talk a little bit about what they've learned so far, where their process is. And I thought we'd get started with Bennett Sandler from the Buildings and Efficiency Group. Bennett?
I, of course, put all my notes on a computer without actually having, so I will refer to them. Hi, Bennett Sandler, with the Buildings and Efficiency Group. And we, like I think most of us, are feeling like we're at the very beginning stages of this process, and there's quite a bit of clarity and definition within our strategic focus still yet to do. We did meet March 18th. We actually had a 2-hour get-together session, which was sort of a very nice get-to-know-you. We started evaluating the touch points that were spelled out in the sheet that was given to us from the supervisory group, and we began to review those points and talk about sort of logistics. And so the logistics have been hammered out. We've figured out a meeting time. Our meetings are going to be actually, at this point, once a month, but virtual. We've got a Zoom account and can meet through online. So we found a date that seemed to work for everyone. We set up a Google Docs place to dump data sets and share documents, including the sort of the strategic outline that we're working on. And I've begun and haven't yet shared with the rest of the group an Airtable cloud database for organizing and maintaining task lists and data sets as well. So logistically, we've got those elements down. We've gotten somewhat early on captured by the idea of, and I'm bringing this up because I think that most of the groups are going to want some permutation of this data set, but some breakdown of energy consumption by building category, the spatial distribution of those buildings, and as a baseline for beginning to think about what various energy efficiency upgrades, mechanical system upgrades can result in terms of our overall consumption within the county. So. I don't know, Ashley or Tony, do you guys have any other thoughts or comments?
As you say, we're trying to gather that data and start looking at what's out there. There might be other crossover with other groups, and so we're going to try to keep talking to each other also.
Yeah, we got an interest. There is I'm sorry, Patrick Ryan, who's in the group, isn't here. He got a hold of actually what looks like a data dump from NYSEG, which actually looks pretty valuable, but it's convoluted, to say the least. So I'm still trying to work through it. I don't know if Patrick's had some time to look through that. I will say that actually during the last meeting that we had, I did go through and step through and have put together an Airtable, a list of the different energy audit programs that NYSERDA runs. So that is another element of the stuff that we've been looking at.
Okay. And does anyone here have any questions for Bennett or anyone in the Buildings and Efficiency Group at this time? So next up we'll have Barbara Ann, who's heading up the Economic Development Group.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Just want to give you a few updates. Our committee has met twice. We've met in March and in April. It's the third Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. at the Chamber office. Some updates are we want to keep our connection strong with NYSERDA. So programs, as we hear of them, we are going to ongoing share them with our businesses. In fact, we have an event coming up on May 8th at 9 o'clock at Northern Eagle Beverage. We are going to welcome Michelle Woodell, who's with the Green Jobs, Green New York Energy Study Program. And the title of the program is Understanding Energy Usage in Your Small Business and How to Increase efficiency and reduce costs with an energy study. So that will be open to the public. There is no cost. And as we hear of those programs ongoing, we will be connecting to our business community. The second item is that we want to understand if a new business wants to come here, get established, how do they get immediate access to electricity and natural gas if it's needed. So NYSEG will be coming to our next committee meeting. Melanie Putnam has offered at 9 a.m. on May 15th, and we're going to have a joint meeting with the Buildings and Efficiency Committee. So, oh, excuse me. So supply.
that's true.
We can all go.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
go
we're
too.
gonna go too. Everybody.
Everybody is invited then, from all committees to understand that, because I think once we have that documented, it's something we want to share broadly with everyone in the business community.
Who from NYSEG?
It's Melanie Putnam. She's the community liaison director, and she serves on the Chamber's Energy Committee as well.
What time's the meeting on the 8th?
On the 8th, it's also at 9 a.m. at Northern Eagle Beverages right next door here in their conference room. Other things that we talked about was also being able to connect some of the committees as we're learning about other studies that have been done in other areas, to be able to share that with the committees, to be able to share that with one another and talk about best practices. So I put a request in through the SUNY Foundation, Research Foundation, through Michelle Caton, through the Small Business Development Center, and she's going to search for all the ones, at least in New York State, and then we're widening our search to other best practices in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, that have similar size communities as ours. So that's sort of our next step, and we hope to have some of those plans by our next meeting in May. That's all that I have right now.
Thanks, Barbara. Does anyone have other questions for Barbara Ann or anybody else on the committee? And next up, we'll have Karen Sullivan from the Environment. What?
Next one's environment.
Oh,
We're going out of order.
oh, I didn't realize it was
It's on your
listed.
agenda.
I'm just making stuff up. Okay, we'll have Danny Lappin from the Environment Committee. The chair of this committee, Trish Riddell Kent, isn't able to be here tonight, so Danny's gonna speak.
Oh, thank you so much.
Come on up, Danny.
All right. Sure. Thank you guys all for having me. Danny Lappin. I serve along with Dave, Trish Riddell Kent, and Mark Davies on the Environment Subcommittee. What we have done is try to map out a course of action for the next several months. We do realize that interactions with our potential vendor could change things around a little bit. What we did is we tried to evaluate our tasks 4 and 5, which basically entails understanding and inventorying the respective strengths and weaknesses of a wide range of conventional energy sources and renewable energy sources. And we've divided those tasks amongst our group members. Some of us will be taking on renewable energy, others will be taking on conventional energy. We plan on analyzing the respective strengths and weaknesses, bringing it back to our May meeting, writing it out, and then providing it to the rest of the task force in a more solid form over time. We also wanted to investigate potential speakers or experts from various energy sectors to educate and build educate our committee and build our capacity to understand the more complex sides of different types of energy development that our committee may not have the capacity to take on at this time. One of the other things we wanted to do is to start looking at greenhouse gas emissions inventories. And we kind of realized that that might be an area where we do need help from a vendor or help from a technical service expert to give us the correct methodology, the correct understanding of how to build something like that from the ground up, so that we're not spinning our wheels or wasting time on the vendor's behalf and resulting in inefficient expenditure of billable hours. And with that said, we're going to meet again, I think, in the middle of mid-May sometime, and be happy to take any questions. Yes.
Not so much a question as a suggestion, Danny, in terms of greenhouse gas inventories. Tompkins County has gone through and been monitoring our greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the things that we recognize, and some of you may be aware, that there's some new science on how harmful methane or natural gas is to global warming. And nonetheless, the state and the EPA are still using the old science on that. And so what we've done in Tompkins County is we looked at the standard old science and the measures of greenhouse gas emissions that way, but we also looked at what the measures would be using the new, the current science. And there's certainly some push at the state level to get the state to modernize their data as well. But I'd suggest that as you look at the greenhouse gas emissions, that the EPA standard kind of emissions numbers are going to be relatively easy to come by. And actually the conversion from those to match the current science isn't that difficult to do, but I think it's worth doing.
Would it be possible, do you have any contacts in Tompkins County that we could bounce some ideas off of should the time arise?
Sure, absolutely. I'm sure Keith knows, but Tony Ingraffia would be one person, Bob Howarth. Bob Howarth is the one who more directly worked on our greenhouse gas inventory, but either one of them are fully conversant.
Yeah, I think the kind of thing is that our committee is looking for is to get this kind of mix of experts in to discuss kind of their areas with us. Because we do have expertise within our committee, but we want to make sure that in areas that we're not as conversant in, that we have the best available science and knowledge to go off of. So it'd be helpful to cultivate those contacts.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put in touch.
Yes, Rachel.
Hi, Dean.
Hey.
I'm just wondering, I'm not clear what the overall, the details of the do I have to? The task force goals are, but I'm wondering how you're going to use this data. In other words, you're saying you're going to take an inventory of the greenhouse gas emissions that the county is currently using?
Potentially. We haven't even, we've discussed.
I mean, the idea,
We've
right.
discussed it at a broad, 30,000 foot
Right.
level.
Yeah.
We haven't distilled down the how, the
Sure.
research question, the
And-
methodology,
Yeah.
or like the specific kind of research realm that we're going to look at quite yet. That's kind of
I
why
can
we
imagine it's an enormous undertaking.
Right, so that's why we want to approach like we want to develop a strategy on how we approach the problem before we attempt to define it.
Right. So, but the idea is that, I'm asking, is that you're going to collect the data, once you figure out a template to do that, and you're going to crunch basically the numbers of the existing emissions from what we already have here is the idea. I'm asking.
To the greatest extent practicable,
Right.
but again, it's subject to change, but our intention is to try to do it to our best ability.
Great.
But
So I guess I just have a bigger question.
sure.
So I'm just wondering how that data is going to be used. Is the intent of the task force to not have any further increase in greenhouse gas emissions as per
We're
the
not
state?
there yet.
We're not there yet. I mean, I think that I would defer that to the leadership.
Right, no, I'm asking in general.
Yeah, I think that, that's a broader discussion that we need to have
Okay.
as a task force, and something that, I as a subcommittee member, I'm ill-suited to answer properly, but
Okay.
I think that right now, the way that I would suggest approaching it conceptually would be to understand our current state of energy sector, understand the current greenhouse gas emissions in our county, understand the problem, try to define it to the best of our ability, and come to eventual consensus about what our approach will be to solve the problem over time. And that will be a result of the planning process. The problem being of how to plan for our energy needs over the next, 10 to 20 years.
I mean, my idea is without increasing, I mean, we're all supposed to be reducing according to the state, according to the IPCC. So let's say we don't reduce. Wouldn't a reasonable goal for the committee be to not increase any further?
I think that, like I said before, from a planning process, this is like a consensus-driven approach. And so that debate will need to occur over time. So like for me, again, I can't answer that question because it's inappropriate for me to express my views on top of what everyone else is
That will be
saying.
developed through the course of the, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, sure, if I can, I'll try to be helpful.
Thank you so much.
So the basic idea would be at the outset here, we're working on assessing what's happening right now
Right.
in Otsego County from a greenhouse gas perspective, from an
Right.
energy use perspective. Once we all have the data that we agree is good data, comprehensive data,
Right.
stuff we've all worked together and are behind on, we can from there do an analysis of what our strengths and weaknesses are, and then come up with a set of goals. And
Okay.
so these goals have not been defined yet.
Right.
And it's something that we're hoping is, if as long as we can get this process going in a way that's productive, that we can together come up with goals.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was a plan to have a goal. So,
That's the idea.
I just want to,
what's that?
We do want to have,
Oh, no, and I'm just saying, I don't understand the process, and I haven't seen any documentation of what the goal is, so if there is a goal, and so I think that's been my biggest concern, is that,
So the goal is a community energy
my biggest
plan.
concern is perhaps that there might not be an end goal, and that you guys are gonna do all this hard work, and then to what end? And so I'm just trying to get clear, because I am trying to trust the process, and I am very grateful that you've all given your time. I know this is enormous, and I was one of the people who asked for this, so I'm really appreciative. I do wanna trust the process, so I'm just trying to understand if there's going to be a goal. It sounds like there will be developed over time as opposed to in the beginning.
There definitely will be,
Okay.
and I think
Thank
that
you.
it's hard to develop planning goals without a clear understanding of our energy system and its needs. And so usually you want to kind of gather that data first before you kind of think about, okay, where's the end goal? How do we want to get there and everything like that? So, go ahead, Dave.
I would just add to what Danny said. We're involved in a quantitative process right now, not a qualitative process, because we need information. And for example, recognizing the difference between residential, commercial, and transportation and so as we go down the line, I think we've already said that the transportation issue might be one of the harder ones to get a handle on. So there's many versions of what we have to look at, and so as we said, we haven't even considered the end game here. We're just in the beginning.
And part of it is understanding, doing like a gap analysis, so understanding where our data and research and knowledge gaps are, and trying to plug those gaps as fast as possible so that we don't waste resources on, a flawed planning process.
So I guess I could say a couple things. Our subcommittee actually had a conversation about the greenhouse gas thing too, a little bit. And there was a concern raised, and actually all of us had it, it wasn't any one side or another, that it becomes important if you do a greenhouse gas analysis that you understand the metrics and how and that type of thing, and it can become exceedingly difficult. I guess we had a shared recognition that this is tough to actually to find out what those numbers are, and to know you're correct about them, and that people agree that we're looking at the methodology of getting those numbers correct.
That was our conclusion, exactly.
So we actually had frankly had some reservations. Karen, tell me if I'm wrong. But we had some reservations about trying to come up with specific numbers like that.
Right.
Because you might not ever get to agreement as to how you do that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe all the task or the small working groups have struggled with this a little bit. How specific do we want to be in our understanding? How granular do we want to be with our understanding? And one of the analogies that really spoke to me was someone in the buildings and efficiency group said, we know the ship is sinking. How much time do we want to take to study it? But I think there's a level of understanding that's helpful, and beyond that, maybe it's too much. The amount of time spent isn't worth the gain.
Yeah.
But just a basic idea, and I wish I could tell you exactly what that is, but I don't know. I think we'll find that out as we try to as we try to learn.
It's one of those things where you can spend a lot of time trying to get into the minutia of every single source, but at the same time, if you know at the end that if we're really going to try to tackle climate change in some way, we just got to figure out how to use less fossil fuels than we did before, then that can become a goal, and that people can agree on, irrespective of whether you agree on exactly how you calculate each one of those numbers. We know that we have to reduce our dependency.
And I think that most, I don't want to speak for the group, but it sounds to me like most people in this group would agree with that statement.
I think like the planning process, you're taking these like kind of very broad realm of planning and you're trying to narrow it down. And so right now we have all these broad things and each one has analytical components that we all know can bog down the process, especially your point about greenhouse gas emissions inventory is well taken. We had some of the same reservations at our committee level, and in not only the methodology, but the ability to collect certain data sets, the ability to even crunch numbers ourselves or to follow specific modeling procedures and understand the methods that other entities have developed over time. I think, and that's kind of an area that we're like, oh my God, we need help doing that. And so, but figuring out whether that's possible is all part of the planning process. You want to know your analytical limits and try to do your best to either address them, or if you can't address them, start figuring out how you could address them in the future.
On the air quality, you've already said it, Keith, but when we were looking at the wood burning plant in Oleana potentially 20 years ago, we thought we really need to get data on particulate matter, and they were collecting some data at the Albany airport and some data at the Binghamton airport. That was it. So there's really no data. It's really tough to get that air quality. One second thing, I believe there's an article in Scientific American, I think it was 2018, on methane. I've not read the article, but I think it was Scientific American at the beginning of the year in 2018. I hope it's a good article, never read it. But.
And our final report from our working groups would be Karen Sullivan from the Energy Supply and Distribution Group.
Thank you. Our group includes Lou Allstadt, Keith Shue, myself, Amy Wyatt, and Russ Southern. It's a good working group, very knowledgeable individuals. I keep saying I'm the greenest person when it comes to not knowing a lot about electricity. Turn the switch, the light comes on. We talked about greenhouse gas emissions. We had 2 meetings, March 13th, which was really housekeeping. I was assigned as facilitator. We're going to rotate the note scribe person so that one person isn't burdened with those minutes. We tried to schedule our meetings the second Wednesday of every month. We've been successful for the last couple months, and we've got some planning to do for the next meetings moving ahead. Our next meeting is May 8th. We reviewed the responsibilities of our subcommittee with a focus on what our tasks were. We had 6 tasks that were assigned to us, and there was recommendations by our group to include NYSERDA in our first task, include Otsego County Electric Co-op, which we've already done. They'll be coming to our next meeting. Identify opportunities and challenges of implementing renewable energy efficient projects. Identify improvements to energy infrastructure policy regulations to support opportunities under our 6 tasks. So we've added 2 extra tasks in the way we've summarized it. We reviewed the facilitator's responsibilities and the committee's responsibilities. And then we left that meeting with some action items. So I always like to conclude meetings with, okay, who's going to do what next, so that we know we have some tasks ahead of us. So we had tried to reach out to Public Service Commission. One of the first comments brought to committee by Lou Allstadt was, we need to know what regulations are ahead of us. If we're looking at these opportunities and obstacles, we need to know what the regulatory authorities are saying. We haven't been necessarily successful to get someone to come to the table yet, but we're still working on it. The other thing was to research our current infrastructure, our power lines, and our fossil fuels. Amongst us, we brought various websites that have that information, and we're looking at collection points and distribution points of liquid fuel in the county, as well as storage and volume coming into the county, identifying the % of households in the county with the type of fuel use. So I was speaking with Bennett. He might be able to help us out with some data that he has. But just identify the major users, identify the percentage of people using wood, the percentage of people using oil, the percentage of people using gas. So we are working on that as well.
Identify pipe and power lines crossing the county and research our current infrastructure, our power lines, our fossil fuels, etc. So I kind of look at us at like the bottom layer of everything. I'm trying to keep a focus to say, yeah, there's a lot of good ideas, a lot of options for us to look at, but we need to bring all this infrastructure together. So we are the heart, the valves, and the arteries of this system. We are going to tell you where everything's flowing, where it's located, what are our critical points of challenge, what our challenges are, as well as identify potential sites for, as Amy already brought to the table, sites for possible solar projects. Locating a solar project is not as easy as you think it is, especially if it's a community solar project. Many of you already know that. We struggled with that when the county did their solar project. So let's look at those points in the county that really have the accessibility and the capacity for a solar community project. You know, maybe everybody thinks it's that easy. It isn't. So Amy has been very helpful, and Amy works with NYSERDA as well as the Energize New York program. Going into our second meeting, which was April 7th, we brought, there were a couple handouts that were brought to the table, and I have copies, or I can send them on to anyone. Lou had presented the one handout of the solar generation that had been included in Otsego County. Also the energy sources from source and in-use consumption, which is, let's see, this one that you maybe, I don't know how many people were at the Energy Forum. Okay, so we distributed handouts. We had a distribution showing the declining cost of solar and the incentives for it, maps of local electricity transmission capacity from NYSEG and National Grid. We reviewed the National Pipeline Mapping System, and I applied to get on to the next level of accessibility on that, and I was approved, so we will be looking at that website. And flow charts of energy from source to end using consumption. We discussed, again, overview of the solar projects in Otsego County already, so we do have documentation of the number of solar projects that have come into the county in Otsego County over a period, I think, of 10 years. And we also had discussed it would be beneficial for us to identify locations that could accommodate future solar projects. We had contacts where we are attempted to Peace Public Service Commission. And we wanted to discuss the need for information from the state on changing policies. And Russ is trying to reach out to a contact that he has with NYSEG, but I do believe from this last conversation, our meeting, we're all planning on going to Barbara Ann's meeting. So what I'm getting a sense is if the subcommittees aren't communicating with each other, we may be making the same efforts. I'm glad to hear that greenhouse gas is being discussed. You know, in our discussion, we didn't want to waste our energy and expenses on doing that because we are a supply and distribution subcommittee. So I don't know how we can integrate our discussions amongst us to make it easier for the rest of us to know what each other is doing. Maybe
a thought, if you wanted to share your minutes of your meetings when they were, as soon as they were ready, to just put them out to
okay,
the
so
other
we've been
groups.
sending them to you guys, and then, all right, that could be.
Or you can send them to us and we can send them out.
Okay,
So, yeah,
all right.
I think that might be the best way.
Yep, so that's one thing I'm gathering from the conversations. So, again, our next meeting is May 8th at the Meadows office building. We have had people participate in our group, and we try to mention that in our group we will take comments at the end of our meeting. We're trying to be as transparent as possible, but we also have a job to get done. So are there any questions that you may have?
What time at the Meadows?
We meet at 1 o'clock
In the county building, in your building?
in the Meadows office complex.
Meadows, yeah.
Yeah, I try to get a room reserved in the training room.
So I guess the only thing I would add is when we're asking NYSEG or NYSERDA, or both, to help us look at places where solar could be installed, I think we were also going to ask them to tell us what kind of capacity improvements could be made elsewhere in the system to increase that. As I remember,
It's a big limiting factor.
yeah, because it is extremely limiting right now. That is something we found out.
Yeah.
Are you looking at the amount of installation that's taken place over the last 10 years on residential buildings also?
Yes.
As
I'm sorry.
opposed- Solar installations on residences?
Yes, we do,
Okay.
yeah, it shows,
Okay, great.
it shows residential
Yeah.
and it shows community power purchase,
Great.
yeah, it was a great website, and we can share that, our minute, it's in our minutes in our agenda, so, yep. Amy's a great little resource, as well as Keith, as well as everybody else. I'm just here to organize. So, thank you.
So then, next up, I forgot to say thanks to everyone for waiting out in the hall. There was an arraignment in here that was unplanned. We reserved the room for 5. And next up, we're gonna have Greg talk to everyone a little bit about the RFP process, so you know what to expect.
Sure. I don't know if you all know me. I'm Greg Mattice, city engineer, part of the leadership committee. Just want to clarify how the RFP process works. It's a formal process. We do it all the time in local government at the county level. Otsego County actually has an agreement with Onondaga County to do their purchasing through Onondaga County. So ultimately, when the county approves the RFP to be advertised to solicit proposals, it's going to go through Onondaga County. So if you hear that, just to clarify. You all received a copy of the draft RFP. We're looking for additional comments. If you'd like to discuss that at your upcoming committee meetings this month, we'd appreciate with your minutes to send back any additional comments you might have. And then we're going to meet again on May 28th, so we'd like to have those comments back by May 24th, if that's at all possible, as long as you guys are meeting before then. That way we can hopefully finalize the RFP and then get that going through the county's system, their process to actually advertise that. We'd hope to have, I think conservatively, by sometime in July, we'd have the responses back from prospective firms, and we'd go through the process. The leadership committee would be the ones to review and score the responses and ultimately select a consultant, or recommend the selection to the county. The county board would ultimately select the consultant, and then hopefully by September we'll have someone on board, and then we'll introduce them to you at whatever the next full task force meeting, whatever date that falls on. I think as you've seen in our draft, the real intent of this consultant is not to write the plan for us. That's what we're doing. It's a stakeholder-based plan. That's what we all are. They're just going to help facilitate it. Hopefully they'll have some good experience in writing or participating in the creation of these types of plans so they can advise us appropriately, maybe help us find data if we're having trouble. I think we've got a lot of resources for that, but maybe just really acting as a facilitator to make sure that we're all headed in the same direction and we're following the necessary steps along the way to come out with a good plan in the end. So really that's the general goal of it. I can't really talk about the specifics. This is another one of those documents which really we shouldn't release to the public just yet until we actually solicit for proposals, because it's basically something we're concerned about, having fair competition, so we don't want to have anybody get an unfair advantage. So if you would keep it among your groups for now and send any comments back to us, and we'll take it from there.
And then once it is finalized and released, then it can be freely shared with whomever.
Yeah, it'll be publicly advertised. We can share the link and we can give it to anyone they like at that point.
And I just wanted to add, through our RFP process with the county, we send the document to our purchasing department. So if there are names of people that you would definitely want to have that RFP sent to, we can include it at that time when we send the RFP to the purchasing department. So it's important that you send back. We can always share it on our own, but if they want to be in the first group out, it'll go out from the purchasing department to specific names as we're given them. So feel free to share.
Yeah. The more responses, the better. So that's all I have, unless you guys have any further questions about that.
Okay.
Yep. And then I would just say, did we set our next full meeting? Because I have it written down.
Okay, June 1st? Oh, July 1?
I have June 26th because
26.
it was too close to the July 4th.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking our full group meeting.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
Oh,
I've got the 26th at 5 at Clark.
Yeah, yes, that's right, yeah.
So, yeah, we're gonna reserve.
Sorry, it's in here. June 26th at 5 PM at the Clark Sports Center. So we have the room reserved, so we will not be waiting for an arraignment. We will go straight in at 5.
Can you repeat that date again?
June 26th,
Okay.
5 PM, Clark Sports Center in Cooperstown. And just before we wrap it up for today, thanks for everyone for coming out. We thought we'd keep this first meeting short and sweet to get our legs underneath us. But we can open it up at this point to any questions from anybody who's here as a visitor or as a task force member. Anyone have any further questions?
So the RFP will never be posted for public comment, is that correct?
Right, RFPs are never posted for public comment, yes.
I guess I had a question, because I know there are other regional planning initiatives going on, perhaps simultaneously with ours, like from STA. And can you say something about how that relates or does not relate to our efforts?
Sure. So, as everyone knows, Southern Tier 8 is an economic development agency of 8 counties in our region, and including Otsego County. It's the northern tip of the Appalachian region. And they have, actually Tompkins County is part of the Southern Tier 8 counties. And Broome County, there more than Otsego County has issues with energy. So they decided to do an 8-county RFP for someone to do an energy assessment for them. And I believe Karen can probably talk more about it than I can. She's on their board. But they put out an RFP, and I think they've selected someone at this point. I'm not sure 100% because there's a funding delay having to do, it's federal funding, and there's a delay having to do with the government shutdown, sort of the after effects of that government shutdown. Karen, did you want to add more about that?
We were careful to look at the inclusions of what the RFP for Southern Tier 8 had to make sure we weren't duplicating efforts. They'll be doing 8 counties without necessarily the level of detail that we'll be doing for ourselves. So it'll complement, I believe, what we're doing, but our RFP is to get someone to facilitate the groups that we have. And we're cautious to not duplicate what they're doing, and we did look into that.
So when we say duplicate efforts, what we're meaning by that is get the data gathering aspect of it, the assessment portion, the numbers, not the goals, etc. So it's the efforts we're trying not to duplicate have to do with just not paying somebody to do something that another energy plant has already done. So. Adrian?
Is there a range of costs for the consultant? I mean, is there a,
Can we say that? I don't.
The amount of money that the county put
how much money are we talking about?
Well, that's in the public minutes.
It's in the public
okay.
record.
So, yeah, so we've set aside $50,000 of program income money.
Okay.
Yeah.
But just one last, or if there aren't any other comments, ultimately what we will be putting forward is specific to Otsego County. It's a community energy plan for Otsego County, so it will reflect our specific requirements and goals. So again, I thank you for coming out tonight and all the work that you do in your committees, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you.